we're going to wrap up the study about loving our neighbor. We're going to look at chapter 13. I'll get back.
Couldn't last 2 minutes.
Keep you out.
They did. No, Caleb already asked John Foot to do it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm here with you.
So I told him he'd preach and I would teach.
All right. We looked briefly last week. We'll go back. I said the Church of Corinth had all kind of problems going on. There was envy, jealousy, arrogance, immorality, boasting. They were suing each other in court. They were eating meat that had been sacrificed to idols, and that caused issues for some of the brethren there. There were divisions, factions, issues about the Lord's Supper, and also the use of spiritual gifts. One of the biggest ones was they were trying to see who had the best spiritual gift, because they all wanted to have the gift of speaking in tongues. And Paul says in the chapter 12, as we looked at, and I show you still a more excellent way. And that brings us to chapter 13. I'm going to read 13 all the way through, and we'll come back and talk about what he's saying there. Keep in mind that although, as I said last week, although this is used a lot of times at weddings, this is not the ideal. The love that's expressed here is not that type of love. The love expressed here is what we're talking about all along. Are you willing to do for others what you would have them do to you? Are you willing to see to their needs over your needs, basically? Let's look at this passage. If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but do not have love, I have become a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and know all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing. And if I give all my possessions to feed the poor, and if I surrender my body to be burned, but do not have love, it profits me nothing. Love is patient. Love is kind, and is not jealous. Love does not bring and is not arrogant. Does not brag and is not arrogant. Does not act unbecomingly. It does not seek its own, is not provoked, does not take into account a wrong suffered, does not rejoice in unrighteousness, but rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. But if there are gifts of prophecy, they will be done away. If there are tongues, they will cease. If there is knowledge, it will be done away. For we know in part and we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will be done away. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. When I became a man, I did away with childish things. For now we see in a mirror, dimly, but then face to face now. I know in part, but then I will know fully, just as I have been fully known. But now faith, hope, love abide, these three, but the greatest of all these is love. Why does Paul put this passage where he does? After all the problems Corinth's going on, he's written this letter to them, pointing out what the problems are, and then he has this chapter about love stuck singly in the middle. What point is Paul trying to make to us? And to his listeners then, but to us as well.
Because love is the remedy for all those problems. Because that's the greatest commandment, right?
Yeah. Of all those strifes, all the issues they went through that I just mentioned a minute ago, all the that they were dealing with, every single one of the things they were trying to cope with, Paul says the answer is love. The answer is love. If you love your brother, there wouldn't be jealousy. There wouldn't be strife. If you loved your brother, there wouldn't be arrogance, immorality, boasting. You wouldn't be suing each other. You wouldn't do anything that would cause a brother to stumble. There wouldn't be divisions or factions or who's trying to think they're more important. You know, what was one of the issues about the division and faction? I think maybe Ray touched on this recently. But some are saying what? I follow.
They're preacheritis.
Yeah, preacheritis. Yeah, they thought it was more important. If you followed Apollos versus following Paul, they thought you had a hierarchy there in their minds, at least. Made them more important somehow. Gave them rights to brag. Had issues about the Lord's Supper. You know, the Lord's Supper it wasn't what it's set up to be. It became just a free-for-all. Those would get there early, eat all the food. Some would get drunk. There was all kinds of issues going on with the Lord's Supper. And again, this use of spiritual gifts. They all wanted what they thought was the most important thing, which was, in their minds, speaking in tongues. So Paul addresses that here, and he devotes an entire chapter 14 that talks about what's really the most important, and it's not speaking in tongues. So let's look at 13 a little closer. In the first three verses, Paul is pointing out the emptiness of all we do without love. And he goes almost to the extreme. But he says, even if you had the ability to speak with tongues, which in their minds, remember, that was the top. Your spiritual gifts was the top. Even if you have that ability, Paul says, and he says, tongues of men and of angels. I'm not sure what that of angels means, and you may tell me. But you don't have love, you're nothing but a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. Put that in terms that I can fully grasp.
No matter what you do, if you don't love, you're just making a bunch of noise.
A bunch of noise. A bunch of noise. I remember when I was probably 10 or 11 years old, in the middle of downtown Raymer, they were having some group was having a meeting, and a friend of mine and maybe my brother rode up on bicycles, and we're listening to what they're saying, and they're speaking in tongues. We didn't know what they were doing. I really thought one of them was having some kind of a health issue until more than one started doing it. They're laying on the pavement, gravel, but they're saying stuff that we couldn't understand what they were saying. They were getting worked up about it. We had no idea what they were saying. But Paul says, even if you have the ability to speak in tongues, even if you can speak in tongues, but you don't have love, it's like what I was hearing as a child. It's what I was hearing. Noise. We'll be banging on drums. If I have the gift of prophecy, which we're going to see in 14, Paul says the greatest gift is the gift of prophecy. But even if I have the gift of prophecy, and if I know all mysteries, if I have all knowledge, and nobody does, none of us at least, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, Jesus said if I had the faith of what? A mustard seed, I can say, tell that to move and to move. I don't know if everybody will do that, have we? But Paul says, even if you have that faith, even if you have the faith that you could say to a mountain, it move, but you don't have love, nothing. You're nothing. Wait a minute. Can you imagine the Corinthians who value spiritual gifts so highly that he wanted to build his speak in tongues? And now they're hearing Paul say, if you do have all these spiritual gifts, these are what they're wanting. Even if you have those things, but you don't have love, you're nothing. You're not up here, you're down here. Verse 3. If I give all my possessions to the poor. Now you remember, this is what's called the rich young ruler issue, right? Because when Jesus asked him, or said to him, go sell all you got and give to the poor and come follow me, the rich young ruler walked away sad because he had a lot of stuff. Paul says, even if you do that, if you sell everything you've got and give it all to the poor, and even if you surrender your body to be burned. What's he talking about, surrender your body to be burned?
Martyrdom.
Martyrdom, yeah. You know, Christians were being burned alive. Paul says, even if you volunteer to do that, if you step out there and say, burn me. My faith is strong, burn me. If you don't have love, you're what? It profits me nothing. Wait a minute, Paul. You're telling me that if I die because of my faith, without love, it means nothing. Thoughts or comments? Now we look at some of the verses 4 to 7. Really talk about what love does. As I said before, you know, love involves action. It's not just some concept. It's not just some thought process. It's not something we say and don't do. It requires action. I can say I love my neighbor. How do I show that I love my neighbor? I've got to do something, right? I've got to do something. Pretty simple. Verse 4. Paul says, love is patient. Oh, I know y'all are like me. Don't struggle that way all, do you? Love is patient. Love is kind. It is not jealous. Remember again, he's speaking to the church at Corinth who was having issues with jealousy. Having issues of not being thinking about other people. Kindness wasn't part of it. Love does not brag. Doesn't matter what spiritual gift you had or thought you had. It's not arrogant. It does not act unbecomingly. What does that mean? It does not act unbecomingly.
NIV says it does not dishonor others.
And you were saying in every church again, they were dishonoring others, weren't they? All right. Thank you. It does not seek its own. It's not provoked. Does not take into account a wrong suffered. So if I've been done wrong, I get revenge for that, right? I'll get even. No. Somebody wrongs me. We looked at this briefly, I think. What do we do? So we hit you on one cheek, you do what? Turn the other cheek. Ask for your coat. Your shirt, give me your coat too. Whatever that goes. It's almost contrary to human nature, to me at least. We don't take into account a wrong suffered. Somebody does you wrong, you don't treat them any differently than you would anybody else. Or you don't treat them any different than you want to be treated yourself. Absolutely wrong. Does not rejoice in unrighteousness. You're not glad when somebody else sins. You're not glad when you see somebody else fall. You're not glad when you see somebody else dealing with difficulties. You hurt because of that. You strive to want to help them get through whatever they're dealing with. Not something you smirk about, not something you tell others about. Well, do you see what happened? I knew it was going to take place. I knew it was coming. Rejoices with the truth, bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Verse 8 tells us something else very important about love. Love what? Love what?
Never ends.
Never ends. It's all never fails. It's always going to be there. Unlike prophecies, I might have the gift of prophecy. That's going to end, Paul says. Speaking in tongues, I might have that gift. It's going to end. But love will always be there. Love will always be there. And Paul is saying, you know, if you want to strive for something, if you want to hope for something, love others. Love others. And treat them as you want to be treated yourself. Now, beginning verse 13, verse 11, he talks about being as a child, etc., etc. Well, let me back up. I wrote this down, and I don't remember where this came from. It said, positively, love is patient with people and gracious to them with generosity. Negatively, love never envies or brags or is arrogant, since that is the opposite of selfless service to others. Never rude, overbearing. Love never wants its own way. Is not irritated or angered in personal offenses, and finds no pleasure in someone else's sin, even the sins of an enemy. On the positive side again, love is devoted to truth in everything. So, Paul talks about, back in verse 11 again, he talks about when he was a child, he acted like a child, etc. What's that? It seems almost out of place here, but why is it here? What's Paul saying to us? What's he saying to the readers? Time to grow up. When I was a child, I spoke as a child. When you were a child, you spoke as a child. But now that I'm an adult, I don't speak like a child. I don't act like a child. But you, Christians in Corinth, you're acting like children. You're acting like children. And stop it. Stop it. Any comments? So, what does this love look like in everyday living? I'll give us an example. You'll look at 1 Corinthians chapter 6. 1 Corinthians 6, verses 1 through 6. He's talking about lawsuits. Does any one of you, when he has a case against his neighbor, dare to go to law before the unrighteous and not before the saints? Or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? If the world is judged by you, are you not competent to constitute the smallest law courts? Do you not know that we will judge angels? How much more matters of this life? So if you have law courts dealing with matters of this life, do you appoint them as judges who are of no account to the church, in the church? I say this to your shame. It is so that there is not among you one wise man who will be able to decide between his brethren. But brother goes to court with brother, and that, therefore, unbelievers. Actually, then, it is already defeat for you, that you have lawsuits with one another. Why not rather be wronged? Why not rather be defrauded? On the contrary, you yourselves wrong and defraud. You do this even to your brethren. Paul says, rather than sue your brother, you're better off just be wrong. Put it down and move on. You may be, and that's what he talks about in 13 about the self-sacrificing love. But you may be thinking, that's not right. If I've been done wrong, I need to get my payback. Paul says, rather be wrong. Philippians 2, verses 1 to 4. Philippians 2, verses 1 to 4. Reads, therefore, if there's any encouragement in Christ, if there's any consolation in love, if there's any fellowship in the Spirit, if any affection and compassion, make my joy complete by being the same mind, having the same love, united in spirit, intent on one purpose. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility of mind, regard one another as more important than yourselves. Do not really look out for your own personal interests, but also the interests of others. Have this attitude in yourselves, which is also in Christ Jesus. So, and Jesus also talked about being sued. We look at Matthew chapter 5, verse 40. Let's read that real quick. Matthew 5, verse 40. Says, if anyone wants to sue you and take your shirt, let him have your coat also. That's what I was talking about earlier. Whoever forces you to go 1 mile, go within 2. Give to him who asks of you, and do not turn away from him who wants to borrow from you. All right. Any comments? In the passage of Matthew, it follows with the heading of my Bible says love. Verse 43, you have heard that it was said you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he causes his sun to rise on the evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and unrighteous. For if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? They're not even tax cutters do the same? Greet only your brothers, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same? Therefore, you are to be perfect as your heavenly Father is perfect. We looked at that passage earlier talking about love. Paul also gave an illustration about eating meat. And even though that was offered to idols, even though that meat was offered to idols, Paul said no reason you can't eat it unless what? You shouldn't eat it if what?
Offends your brother.
If it offends your brother. Because your brother to stumble, you shouldn't do it. There's nothing wrong with it. But because your brother to stumble, you shouldn't do it. Put the brother's interest above yours. So, any comments? Now, after the first lesson, Les came to me afterward and asked me a question. And I'm going to spend the last part of the class talking about that. I'm intending on doing a full class. But I'm not going to have time to do that. Before I do that, I want to look at 1 Corinthians chapter 14. Read one verse. 14 verse 1. Pursue love, yet desire earnestly spiritual gifts, but especially that you may prophesy. So we've got to pursue love. Pursue love. That ties in a little bit with what Les's question was this. Let me ask the question like this. Why is it that we have Jesus and Paul and John and other authors in the New Testament spend so much time talking about love? Why is that? That's a broad question, I understand. But why is that? Why do they spend all that time talking about love?
Well, I've always believed that, as most, that no matter what venue, if you're preaching, teaching, one-on-one, small groups, before people are going to listen to you, they're going to have to know that you love them.
Okay. All right. Why else? Why does he spend all this time talking about love? Binds us all together, yes. Binds us all together.
We're not, you don't have time, if you feel your lost of love, then you don't have time for all the other stuff, the evil thoughts, the selfishness, the trying to hurt someone else.
It's what Jesus said to do. I mean, it's one of the God said to do. It's one of the commandments. Love God and love your neighbor.
Yeah.
And they reiterated it numerous times.
So why do you think Paul, in chapter 13, why did Paul talk about love in the church of Corinth? Why did he talk about love in chapter 13? I'm going to ask you a very good question, Nate. What was lacking in the church of Corinth? Love. Very right. And so Paul devotes the entire chapter 13, or at least that's the way it looks to us, to love. Why? Why did he do that?
Because that's what they were lacking.
That's what they were lacking, and
That would solve their trouble.
solve their troubles, and what did I just read in verse 14, verse 1? Pursue love. So Paul says, you didn't have love. This is what love looks like. Pursue love. Paul's saying to this church of Corinth, what? You can love. You can choose to love. I think, and this was Les's comment that led that along these lines was, we have a choice. We have a choice. And I agree that we have a choice to the extent that we can love or not love. But if we're going to be followers of Jesus Christ, do we have a choice? No, we don't, do we? We don't. But yet they have to keep talking about it, and keep talking about it, and keep talking about it, and keep talking about it. Why?
It's hard, it's a difficult thing.
Apparently it is. We don't get it done, do we? We have a choice. I guess we, you and I, have a choice. We can choose to love each other, our brothers and sisters. We can choose to put the other's interests above ours. We can choose to love our enemies or not, to love our neighbors or not. But it's not just saying, I love my neighbor. We got to show we love our neighbors by our actions, by our compassion, by putting their interests above ours. And many times, that person may not realize that you've done that. Many times people won't know that you've done that you put somebody else's interest above yours. God knows. God knows. First Corinthians 16, verse 13. Says this. Be on the alert. Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong, that all that you do be done in love. That all that you do be done in love. And that should be our motto. That should be what we live by. That all that we do, not while you're here at the building, not while on Sundays, but all that you do, be done in love. All right, comments?
I think Jesus said it best in John 13. Couldn't go a class without going to John. When he washed the disciples' feet, in verse 34, he says, love one another as I have loved you. That was the new commandment. And he said, verse 35, by this shall all men know that you're my disciples, if you love them. He could have said anything. All men will know that you're my disciples if you do X, Y, Z. But he didn't. It starts with love. Because he says you can do everything in the world, but if you don't love each other, you're going to be known as that church that don't love each other.
Yep. Larry?
Is Paul's letter to the Corinthians for our information or our inspiration?
Okay, what about that? Question? Is Paul's letter for our, what you?
For our information.
Information,
or our
inspiration.
Inspiration.
Do we read that book and just think, well, that turned your car, that's a problem, didn't it? Or do we read that as being inspired, that it's there for us? What do you think, Larry?
I would think that at least in part of those things that I fall into the guilty category.
Well, I think all of us do, if we're honest about it. I think it's there, I think that is here for us just as much as it was there for the Church of Corinth. Paul wrote the letter to the Church of Corinth, but it certainly pertains to us. Any other thoughts? Any other thoughts? All right, that's going to conclude this study. Next week, John's going to start teaching for a few weeks. Get you a break from me, and you know what you're going to talk about yet?
Talk about dealing with disappointment.
Dealing with disappointment. All right. Well, we will get on a little bit early today. We're going to talk about dealing with disappointment starting y'all.